And I thank you, Dean Larson, all the social work club, the students that invited me here to make this possible. This is the third time I've spoken here, but this time it seems, I don't know, cooler and more, I'm more established now than I have in the last several years that I've been here. I'm really excited to share my story with you guys. You follow me on social media, you probably have heard a little bit about my story. And my whole jam is helping people turn the worst of the worst that happens in their life into their greatest strengths. And that's just something that I've done my whole life. I was not dealt a great deck of cards, as you will learn tonight, from the time I was 7 until 14 until 23. So I will bring you in and I'll show you my story. In 2016, I got my first really big speaking engagement. They flew me up to Wisconsin. I was leading this big Out of Darkness for Suicide, if you are understanding of like what the American Foundation does with suicide prevention. They flew me out there and I had to run I had to teach 4 high school classes to hundreds of sophomore students, and it was really exciting for me because I had just started to open up about my history and my past and really started to formulate my story to help other people, right? Because I feel what I do with my trauma, you turn it, you can either let it drag you down or you can let it trajectory you into something really great and build something beautiful out of it. And I learned I didn't have to hold on to all of this pain that I experienced. I could share it with other people to help them get through their hard times. So in 2016, I was tired. We did this 5K run, and I was sharing my story in the 10 afterwards. And this woman, I didn't know if anyone was listening to me. There was a lot going on. There was vendors, and there was a few people under the tent, but there were just, people everywhere. And I kind of felt like I'm just wasting my time. I didn't know if anyone was listening. And I was just like, well, I'm just gonna share it. But I talk to 2 people like I would talk to 2,000. And after I got done sharing my story, and I don't think I necessarily did a great job. I probably stuttered and stumbled over my words a little bit. But this woman came up to me and she was sobbing, and she just held me, she held me in her arms, and she thanked me so much for sharing her story, my story with her. And it turns out she had lost her son to suicide 2 years before. And nobody had ever given her clarification or insight as to why somebody would try to commit suicide and what they were feeling. And she was so grateful to me. She held me in her arms and said, "You're truly strength personified." And that is when I knew, 7, 8 years ago, that I had to make this a thing. And now I have a whole brand, and I've got 2 books. I've got 2 more coming out this year. A journal. I have a consulting firm, which kind of correlates with that, but I've been able to do a lot of work for good, and all of that has kind of been brought up by the pain and turning it into strength. So in order for me to share with you my story, I have to tell you about my mom, because it starts with hers. It was early 90s. A lot of you probably don't remember yet. It's okay. She was 26 or 27. She was the pinnacle of successful. She was single, she was running her own company, she was executive director, she was writing grants for the government. We had a big, beautiful 5-bedroom home. She was very successful and very motivated. And in the early 90s, for a single woman to be doing something like that was extraordinary. Everyone looked up to my mom. She was always dressed to the nines. She had a perfect figure. Her hair was always perfect. Her makeup was always done. She always wore 7-inch heels. Nobody ever knew how she walked in them. But she was really somebody that everyone wanted to be. And not only that, furthermore, she was, ringing bells, no, okay. Furthermore, she was that much of an amazing mother as well. She used to shred carrots outside until the Easter Bunny showed up. She would spend hours at Christmas time stamping hoof prints from the reindeer in the mud outside her house. This is the woman that was my mother. She created the most magical childhood memories for me. She was literally anything you could ever want to be or what to have as a mother. But something that I didn't know, I was 6, 7 at the time, that she struggled with depression. And she was kind of somebody that kept to herself, kept everything together, never said, nobody ever knew that she struggled, nobody ever knew, she just thought that she was the strongest woman possible. And she wasn't. She struggled a lot, she held everything in. She didn't feel that asking for help was a strength. She thought it was more of a weakness. So she held everything in for a long time until she just kind of couldn't do it anymore. And then in 1996, she had a nervous breakdown, We lost our big, beautiful 5-bedroom home and moved in with my grandparents, and she just slowly started to deteriorate. She wasn't that vibrant anymore. She wasn't happy. She had lost her company ran out of money. She just slowly started to dwindle down to this weak woman that I didn't recognize. And I just, everyone's like, your mom's sick. She's not feeling good. She'll get better. It's temporary. It's very strange. But in transitioning in that time, how old I was, I couldn't really understand what was going on, and back then mental health was not discussed. Like, if you were depressed, you need to just straight check it. It was not and even today, there's still a stigma, but it's much more open and talked about now. But then it was like, oh, she's mental, okay. So it wasn't something that was openly talked about, and I certainly didn't know the half of it being 7 years old. And one day I got off the bus at my grandma's house, like I always did. I walked through the door. This was early 1997 in January. So we'd been moved out of our house in there for probably 6 months. She's doing a little better, she's taking meds, whatever. But she wasn't working, she had one disability. Our life was a lot different. All of her stuff was still in storage, And I walked in my grandma's house, and then grandma looked at me. She was horrified to see me, first of all, which was strange because my grandmother was my favorite person in the world, and I was definitely her favorite grandchild. And lived with her, and she was always so excited, and my mom definitely got all of her magic from my grandma. So when I walked in, I knew something was immediately wrong because she was upset to see me. And I'm like, hey, I'm your favorite, here I am. And she was like, where's your mom? And I was like, I don't know. Literally just got off the bus and came home like I always do, right? And she's like, oh, okay. And she, go upstairs and get a snack, whatever. I didn't think anything of it. So I went upstairs, and then later that night, my aunt came to retrieve me and said that Mom got sick and she had to go away for a while, and hopefully she'll be better. Years later, I found out that she was supposed to pick me up from school. That afternoon, she did not. She drove her car off. Her car was found abandoned on the side of the road somewhere. She was wandering around in the woods, delirious because she had taken both bottles of her antidepressant medication and attempts to commit suicide. She was found face down in the snow, and when they found her, the medics, they were looking. We lived in the middle of nowhere, and there was no cell phones, there was no snap location, there was nothing like that. So they were literally looking forever in the dark in the country where there's nothing and no one. And they finally found her, and she was lifeless. She was not alive. But they pumped her stomach and they brought her back to life, and she, was alive. But she looked like my mom when she came home. She sounded like my mom, but she wasn't my mom. I truly believe that my mom and the chance of her ever becoming better and rehabilitating from her nervous breakdown was completely gone. The chemicals that she took altered her brain in ways that just were not able to be rehabbed. So, a year after that, still living with my grandparents, moved in with my father briefly. He was trying to take care of us, and it was my last day of 3rd grade. Things were getting better. She was a little better, but she was still very weak and depressed and laying in bed all day. And she wasn't anywhere near where she used to be. And she picked me up. And the last day of 3rd grade, she was like, we're going on a road trip. We're going to the beach. And I was like, woohoo! We used to take vacations when I was little. We went to Disney World. We were all over. So I was like, this is, I'm getting my super mom back. This is great. I was 8, last day of 3rd grade. And I got in the car, and we started driving a little bit. We were supposed to go to New Jersey, and she said, we're going to Pensacola, Florida. And I knew that was probably bad. I had a feeling, I had no idea at this point. I was 7, I had no idea, or I was 8. I had no idea what was going on. But I knew in that moment that everything was about to change, and I didn't think it was going to be good, and I was right, it wasn't. I was very intuitive as a child. So fast forward a few years. We were in Florida for 5 years. She kind of held me away from my family. 3 of those 5 years, we were homeless. She ran through a disability. She became very religiously preoccupied. She attended this Pentecostal revival church 7 days a week. They basically brainwashed her, but she had a lot of mental illness underlying that was kind of feeding off of that. But the doctors are the devil, and God was just going to take care of everything, and we didn't need to do anything because God was just going to provide for us. I'm going to get all this money, and we're going to have this big house, and this man's going to come save us and take us to the promised land, whatever. And it just kept getting worse. And I I was growing up at that time, and I wanted to believe her. You know, I didn't know anything other than what my mom had ever told me, and I would have these wonderful, amazing memories of my mother, right? Like, so I was like, maybe she's right. You know, maybe like this is fine. You know, she'd tell me, we'd call our family to check in, and they'd be worried, sick, where are you, what's going on? And we'd lie to them, and I would lie too, because I believed her for a long time. Because even though we went through really hard times, and we ended up living in our car, and we went weeks without eating a decent meal, we would stop ketchup packets from McDonald's, went months without a shower, place to sleep, washed my hair in restaurant bathrooms, Barnes & Noble we spent a lot of time in. It was Florida, so it was hot, so like in the summer, air conditioning, you know, big bookstores kind of where I come out, which is the only thing I think that saved my education. Also, I did not go to fourth or fifth grade. She never enrolled me in school, because she said that God didn't talk back to her that I didn't need to go. So it was tough. It was kind of like an adventure, you know. I was just like, we're just on this like cool adventure, like it's kind of crazy, but I always had this hope that my mom would come back, like she would just snap out of it, or she would be right and God would just have money fall from the heavens or something along those lines. But that never happened. So, you know, I dodged caseworkers. There was all kinds of investigators looking for me and looking for Mom, and we were just kind of like, you know, Bonnie and Clyde, we're hiding out until, you know, and I never didn't feel love from her. Even, you know, when we were at our worst, we had like $1, and we got 4 chicken nuggets from McDonald's for $1. Which, by the way, now you can get 10 from Burger King for $1, which I think that's crap, because that would have been really helpful in 1999. But that's fine. I need to add some humor here as a setting, I understand. Anyway, so even when we were like, we literally had 4 chicken nuggets, she would give me 3 of them and only have one for herself. So I knew that she loved me and she wanted to take care of me, and she was in there somewhere. I just didn't know where, and I was wondering when it would all make sense. So fast forward, we've been homeless for going on 3 years, living in our car, couch surfing, getting kicked out of places because she was crazy. And she was crazy, so I did not fault anyone for kicking us out. I was like, I'm sorry, I know she's nuts. Thanks for the shower, bye, you know. Or they'd call the cops and be like, Mom, I just heard her on the phone, sorry, here we go. Then I was 13, she said that she had to go on the Mount Zion, and I was gonna go with her friends while she was gone. And they were gonna watch me, and you know, she'd be back in a couple days. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. So I asked her in the back of a white van. What I am assuming actually happened was she sold me for sex to 2 40-year-old men, and I was locked in a room for 6 days and violently molested. 13, I didn't have sex ed, didn't understand what was happening, had no idea. But that is when I first thought about suicide. That is when I first wanted to die. That was the first time I became obsessed with death and dying and praying that I would wake up. Because that was the first time, even through we'd all been through. I mean, we were dirty, we were hungry, we were tired. I wished I could take a shower and get a new outfit. You know, I was like washing the same pair of ratty underwear for 3 years in the bathroom. Like, that was my life. And I was nowhere near wishing to die. But at that point, I was like, if this is what it is to live, like, I don't want to do it anymore. So I just shut off. I think day 3, I just kind of turned into a stone, and I was like, I just stopped reacting. I became completely unresponsive. Like, they would do whatever, and I think they got bored because I wasn't fighting, I wasn't crying, I wasn't screaming, I wasn't trying to punch in the face. I just took it because I just gave up. And I was like, well, I'm obviously going to die. Like, I'm obviously never getting out of this room. I'm obviously going to die here or stay here forever, so who cares? So I'm assuming what happened is they got bored and they gave me back 6 days later. It was the longest 6 days of my life. And that's when I was like, okay, I can't fucking do this anymore. Like, I'm good. Like, I gotta go. Because up to that point, although there was a lot of neglect going on, I never felt in danger, right? Like, I was very street smart at that point. I could get my way through anything. And then I was like, I'm not safe anymore. She's literally, and I'm assuming this is what happened, she told me, I don't know. I don't know. And I never will. But so that's when I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And so I wrote a letter to my dad. 2 weeks later, the authorities found me. I got put in foster care for 2 months while the court settled. Because while all this crazy shit had been happening in my life, I still was in my mom's custody, not my dad's. And he was in Pennsylvania, and I was in Florida, and the laws are so different. So then I had to go through all this trauma and foster care, and I could literally do a whole presentation on that, but I will not to spare you. So then I get home, right? I'm 14, I haven't been housed or, been in school for 5 years, and I was just supposed to go into high school and act like nothing happened. I don't know. No one knew the velocity of what happened to me. No one knew the meat and potatoes, and I felt very ashamed of what happened. I felt abnormal, I felt weird, I felt broken, I felt dirty, and I didn't want anyone to know. All I wanted to do was go back to normal. I just wanted to suck myself up and just pretend. I just wanted to be what everybody wanted because I was so desperate for love, I was so desperate for attention, I felt like such a piece of crap, I just wanted to fit in, I wanted to blend in, I wanted to have friends, I wanted to play sports, I wanted to go do things, I wanted to go to movies. I didn't go to a movie, I didn't have a sleepover, I didn't have friends, I didn't know how to socially interact. It was fucking weird for a while, okay? But I just became so obsessed with people pleasing and wanting to be normal that I just conformed myself and contorted myself into what I thought everybody wanted to be, and whoever would, give me some kind of friendship, I would just be whatever they wanted, even though, I didn't know who I was. So the school board did not want to let me go into 9th grade. They wanted to put me in some weird side school. But my aunt was luckily on the school board, and she begged everybody. She was like, just give her a chance. So they gave me a chance, and I did it. I went into 9th grade when I was supposed to, and I graduated in 2007 with my high school diploma. I was kind of weird in my freshman year, okay? But by my senior year, I was on treasurer of the FBLA, I was just senior basketball cheerleader, I was on the dance team, I was on the debate team, I had graduated with honors. You would have never known. And that was my goal. I don't want anyone to ever know what I've been through. Because I don't want them to look at me like I'm dirty. I wanted to feel accepted. I wanted to feel loved. Obviously, if this happened to my mother, and my mother did that to me, I don't want to be her. I don't want to be like that. I want people to know what had happened to me. I was very ashamed of it. And I'd never been into a therapy about it either. Because even then, in the early 2000s, it still wasn't really an open thing that anybody talked about. So I surely was not going to bring it up to anyone. And I had everybody, everyone was like, wow, you're so great, you're so amazing. And I did. And so then, college. So while my academics they were okay. I wasn't an honor student the whole time. Math, definitely struggled with. Tests, even worse. So my SATs were terrible. My ACTs were terrible. So I was applying to all these schools and I kept getting rejection letters. And I found Montgomery University. And I found their EOP program. Is there anyone in EOP in here or know what it is? No? Okay, well, anyway, they gave me an opportunity to come here and take classes in the summer, and then if I got through the classes, they would accept me in the fall semester. And of course, I had to jump through a lot of hoops in my life, so it was no big deal. And I got in. And I was like, I'm going to go to school for social work, because I'm going to save all these kids that are going through this. I knew I needed to work in this field, because even then, I knew that I had to use my experiences to help other people, because how was I supposed to live with what happened to me? I always had that inside of me. And I always thought, maybe I'll write a book someday. Maybe I'll, help some kid that was like me, or is like me. Because if it's happening to me, it's happening to someone else, right? So, fast forward a little bit. Sophomore year, the weekend before classes started, I had a party off campus, and I was 19, and I got popped for an underage drink citation. Classes hadn't even started yet, okay? I was a little bit of a wreck. Party Brittany reigned for a long time. Especially here. I was telling my friend Shannon here about it earlier. Showed around hanger and stuff. Anyway, I got caught drinking, and I was like, my father is going to be so mad at me because you get an underage drinking citation, you lose your license for 6 months. And I knew he was going to find out because he was going to get the documents from PennDOT and be like, what did you do? And my greatest fear in life is disappointing my father. So I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh, I have to go home, I have to combat, like I have to intercept this letter coming, and I have to like make up this grandiose story about how I was trying to save some drunk kid and I got caught too. I don't know. But I was like, I'm gonna think of a really good story to make sure my dad is not disappointed in me. So I was like rehearsing the whole way home. I live 2 hours away, so it's not that far. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna say, saving you. Rachel, and I said, yeah, I was going slowly, whole way home. Pull up the driveway, he's mowing the lawn, he's like, hey, I'm like, okay. And I go inside and I'm like pacing back and forth. I remember it. I was like running through my whole like speech in my head. And the phone rang. And it was my Uncle Rich. And you're like, well, so, but it's weird because it's my mom's brother, not my dad's brother. And it was very strange to me why he was calling my dad and not me, right? Like at that point there were cell phones, so I had a phone and he had my number, so it's like, I knew then instantly something was wrong. And I assumed it had something to do with my mom. So I answered the phone, I'm like, hello? And he's like, hey, Britt, what are you doing home? I was like, why are you calling my dad? It's weird. And he was like, and he just couldn't say anything really. He was like, why don't you come see your grandma? Your grandma was saying that she wants, like, he totally was like lying, obviously. And I knew something must have happened to my mom. So I get in my car, tell my dad, I'll be back, we gotta talk. And I drove a few miles down the road to my grandma's, and she was in the grove sobbing. And I stopped, got in my car, walked up to the grove, and they said that your mother's been found in Florida. She weighed 83 pounds. And she was treated for bleeding ulcers, but she was internally hemorrhaging so badly they couldn't do anything, and she died. So, she died of destitution. She died in the street. Alone, but no. And that's exactly what I knew was going to happen to her, and I said that all along. I was like, why'd you stay so long? Like, why'd you go through all that? And I was like, well, because I knew that if I left her, she would die. Because I was the only one who understood what was going on, and I was like protecting her. I became parentified at a very young age, right? And I left her, and she died. And not that there's any great way to die, but 83 pounds off the street. That's what happened to my mom. Linda Wilson Cooley, the executive director of PMAC, she wrote grants to the government. She spoke to Washington, D.C. to 4,000 people. The woman that used to shred carrots outside fucking died, weighing 83 pounds outside, homeless, 2,000 miles away from her family. Because I left her. Like, that was what was in my head, right? Like, that obviously was not exactly what happened, but so I totally internalized that. I knew it was my fault. I knew it. Like, it wasn't, but that's what I had in my head, and I was like, well, now, I just go, like, I'm totally fight or flight, and totally just shove everything down. Like, I don't talk about it, I don't feel it, I just, but like, it's like a dirt under a rug. I talk about this all the time, and people are like, why do you keep talking about this metaphorical rug? Well, because you have a rug, you keep brushing dust under it, it doesn't go anywhere, it's still there. Like, you can't see it, right? So that's what I did with all my problems and all my trauma. I just kept shoving them down and plastering them to the floor, trying not avoiding them at all costs. I didn't want to look at them, it's too painful, right? But, after time, after 10 years or however long, the rug, there's a lump in the rug. And one day you just turn around and trip over. That's exactly what happened to me. So, my mom died. She got flown up. We buried her. I went back to school 2 weeks later. I got my slap on the wrist from the dean of student affairs for my underage treaty citation, which was reported at the university. And I just kept going. And I was like, well, now I have to save even more people because I didn't save my mom. I just became very obsessed with everyone else and not myself. Like, I have to make up for this. Like, I was going to be punished by God or whatever. Like, I couldn't live with myself. And so I did. I graduated here in 2011 with a bachelor's degree in social work on time. Like, I never missed any school or had any kind of childhood trauma, which I was really proud of. But I didn't really tell anyone about it. So it was like I had to keep it to myself. I was just really proud. Like, everyone's like, yeah, everyone's supposed to graduate college for a good job. And I'm like, yeah, but, but I was very proud of that. So then I was like, now I need to go save all these kids. So how do you save all kids in social work? Well, you go to work for children and youth, right? Like, that's obviously what we're going to do. So I got my dream job, moved home, and started working my field, social work, children and youth. I was intake, so everyone starts as an ongoing intake person, which is awful, no offense, which is always. And 6 months in, I was like, I can't fucking do this. Like, I was somebody who needed people to love. Like, I needed people to love me. I needed people to be excited to see me. I needed to make people happy. Well, you don't make people happy doing my job. Nobody's excited to see you, and you're not gonna go, right? So, it really started to wear on me, and I started feeling more and more of a failure. And I started feeling like, wow, why, like, what am I good for? You know, like, literally everything I have touched or tried has not worked out. Everything that I touched. And I just started to really go down this really dark path, and I just started to sink even more and more, and I didn't even know what was happening. I started to really spiral, and I just started to cry uncontrollably for no reason. No reason at all. I just rock and cry in my room. Eventually, I stopped showering, which, when you go 2 years without a shower, like, you don't skip showers. Like, you don't. Like, they are, like, it's a cathartic experience for me every day. I just stopped showering, and stopped caring. All my ADLs went to shit. Then I just stopped going to work. And that was not like me. Like, I was never one to skip work. I had a job since I was 14. My dad has worked at the same place for 40 years. He's always early, he stays late, he works overtime. Like, I was very much instilled a work ethic when I was brought back home. And I just stopped going. I just didn't care. They were calling me and they were like, what's going on? And I was just like, I literally don't know, and I really don't care, and I can't function anymore. I got so wrapped up, and I couldn't explain it. I wasn't sad about my mom, like, forefront. You know, I hated my job, I hated myself, and I just started to deteriorate. And then I had this epiphany. It was July 16th, I remember. I was like, the afternoon, I had been up all night. Actually, I was in the emergency room the night before because I was like having a panic attack. And they gave me Ativan and sent me home, which is like a benzo, calms you down, makes you feel like a vegetable. And I was like just eating those, you know, and I was like trying to feel better. And then I was like, oh, I had this epiphany. It was like the clouds parted, angels sang. I was like, I know exactly what to do to make all of this go away. I know what the common denominator in all the pain in my life and all the things that sucked was me, right? So if I just wasn't anymore, then it wouldn't be like this. Because if my life was going to continue to be so painful and I would be such a failure, there is no way that I could keep going. And I was 23, so like I had a long way to go, hoping, you know. I don't think anybody wants to die before that. But I was like, I can't do this anymore. Then I realized, oh, well, there's like an off switch I can push somewhere, right? Yeah, there is. So I decided that I didn't want to be alive anymore. So the next day I woke up, I made a cup of coffee, I showered, I was like so happy. Because it was like, all gonna be over soon, right? And I was sick as fuck, I was so sick. But I remember just being so, like, everything's gonna be fine. Fine. I didn't think of how my decision would affect anyone else. I didn't think about anyone else. I was, you know, and when people say suicide is selfish, they're correct. It is selfish, but not in the context that it's put. It is because you are not thinking about anyone else because your pain is so great you can't see outside of it, and all you can think about is turning it off and making it stop. And that's where I was. I mean, I was so dark and my head was so twisted. And looking back now, I was like, oh God, you know. So I woke up and made a cup of coffee. My boyfriend went to work, and I put a fish knife in my stomach. Yeah. So I was in an ambulance. I don't remember a lot. It's a little fuzzy. I was in an ambulance. I was wheeled into the trauma center, Robert Packer Hospital, and my clothes were being cut off of me. That's what happens if you've ever been in a traumatic accident. It's very humbling. And again, I wasn't really super conscious, but I was being wheeled into surgery. They were going to try to see what was going on and save my life. And one of the doctors leaned over me. He was like, is there anyone that we can call for you? And that's when all the floodlights came back on, right? All of the lights. And I was like, oh my God, my dad. My dad's going to get this phone call. Like, no father, like, and I love my dad more than anything. I don't talk a lot about him because he didn't put me through any trauma. He's the best man in my life. He saved me, you know. I was like, he did. Oh my God. gonna get this phone call, and I could feel his face burning from the tears. I could hear his voice crack. I thought about who he would have to call, my aunt, he would call everybody, and he would have to make those phone calls and tell them what I did and how he must feel. Like, I didn't think about any of that beforehand because my vision was so clouded. But in that moment when that doctor leaned over me before they put me under, I was just, I said, please call my dad and tell him I'm so sorry. I'm very lucky because, surprise, I lived. I woke up in the ICU like 3 in the morning later that night, the next day, and I was alone because, you know, it's 3 in the morning. Not a lot of visitors in the ICU. I was intubated. I had 26 staples in my stomach. I was alive. And I thought, ooh, really fucked up. You know, I didn't blame my attempt or my life on anyone. I took responsibility for it in that moment. I thought, wow, you did this, you put yourself here. So if you can put yourself at the lowest point possible, what could you do if you tried to do something great? I knew I had a lot of work to do. I knew that I was going to have to unpack all that shit that I went through my whole life, you know. I was not, again, dealt a great deck of cards. But I felt strength in that moment. I mean, worst physical pain in my life, and I had a long road ahead of me. It was 11 years ago. This year will be 11 years. I knew I had a long road of healing to go through, but I was ready to do the work. Because I knew that I never wanted to feel that low to be in that position again. Because, you know, rock bottom has a basement, and I was rolling around on the cold floor for a long time. And that's nowhere to live. And I thought, wow, if I feel like this much shit, I could create something really beautiful out of it. And that's what I've done. I'm very lucky, very blessed. I have a wonderful life. A couple years, 2 years ago, I had a beautiful baby girl. Her name is Bria. She's great. And I can't imagine not being able to be alive to meet her. I had to go through, you know, inpatient psych, outpatient treatment, therapy for years. I mean, I probably still should be in therapy. My friend Shan's here. She's a therapist, so she's kind of like my person I call now. Had abuse and abuse, but I did the work, I put in the work, and I knew I was going to have to write a book and do all this stuff because I decided to turn something awful and all the trauma I experienced into something beautiful. And if I can share my pain and like feel like I'm walking around here in my underwear with you guys, if you can take this back with you and share it with your family or your friends, or someone who feels alone, I mean, that's worth more than anything to me. Your struggles can develop your strengths. You can get what you want in life, you just have to work for it. And it's hard, you know, and I'm still not there yet. Like, I'm hoping to like pack out a Penn State Stadium someday, right? I know it's coming, and I'm slowly getting there. But if you get anything from this, it's, you know, I have to do all the work. I do treatment, I went inpatient after my attempt after I was physically cleared. But then a couple years later, I went back and I got a job in that same facility, and I was a really important member of the treatment team for several years. So I went from patient to professional in the same facility. So that was kind of like the pinnacle of my life. I was like, wow, I fucking did it. Like, and if I can do it, me, like, who the hell am I? Imposter syndrome, like anybody can. So who am I to keep this story to myself? I have to share it with other people. Because I know what it's like to feel low. I know what it's like to not want to wake up. I know what it's like to hate everything and everyone, be so angry and so bitter. But that is not a way to live, and there's a better way. Thank you. Thank you.
At this point in time, we have an issue with not one of the mics doesn't work.